Hello, everyone. Welcome to Winthrop in the World. I'm Paul Baskin, and with us today is Richard Peiser. Professor Peiser is a professor of real estate development at Harvard University, native of Houston, and actually born in Houston, raised in Dallas. Is that right?
Yes.
So you have some familiarity with Texas. You have familiarity with other parts of the world. Professor Peiser's big issue is what's called new towns. He's written at least one book on this, and working on another, I gather.
Correct.
New towns. Let you maybe explain it, but my understanding of it is it's the idea that we're looking at the housing crisis in this country, which is obviously a big issue here in Winthrop housing, but sort of big picture around the world. One of the possible ways of tackling it is to take open land and sort of build planned communities. Is that kind of the general concept here?
Partly, yes.
Yeah. So maybe if you could tell folks. I mean, again, Winthrop is not a new town, but what you're working on perhaps has implications and lessons for what we're trying to figure out here in Winthrop, which is how to deal with the fact that the state and the community needs more places for people. There are certainly people in Winthrop who don't think that belongs here in Winthrop. Maybe there are solutions, maybe there aren't. But I'm just sort of want to hear you on what a new town is, why it's worth studying, and what implications maybe there are for a place like Winthrop. And
Sure.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to be here. And I know Winthrop mainly from flying over it many times.
Yeah. You're so different from so many other people, huh?
Though it was the scene of a favorite memory from college, driving on the beach in an open convertible.
You said earlier a girlfriend here in town?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, that's good. So you have familiarity with Winthrop. You know a little bit of the town. You appreciate the coast and why people in this town want to keep it. Some people really want to keep it the way it is. Others see the need for more housing, and it's a real conflict here in town.
Well, it's a really unique location, and it's unique in many aspects, but to have that much water frontage that actually has some beautiful beaches and other wonderful coastlines. So I understand the desire of people to protect what they have. Let me just say that one time leaving the Logan Airport, I put in our street called Sargent Street and was amazed that it showed that we'd be there in 8 minutes, because it normally takes 20-something minutes. And we ended up in Winthrop, or headed to Winthrop before I realized that he had the wrong address.
Right.
Anyway, so what are new towns? New towns have been with us since the Roman times, but essentially, new towns are intended to be self-contained communities where people can live, work, and play in the new town without really having to leave it. Okay. And if you can achieve that, that of course greatly reduces driving and commuting and many of the problems that come with urban sprawl and our continual expansion of urban areas, which isn't just an American issue, it's a worldwide issue. The new towns in England, there are many new towns around the world. We counted at least 600 that have over 30,000 people.
Okay.
Typically a new town is of scale of at least 6,000 acres and on the order of 80,000 people.
Okay.
You can find smaller new towns, and then there are the most successful new towns, which I just visited are outside of Seoul, Korea, okay, and also around Shanghai, and some of those have grown to be 1 million people.
Okay.
And have gone through successive redevelopment and increases in density and population over time. The original concept of self-containment has rarely been achieved. The early English new towns like Harlow and Stevenage, which are outside of London, built after World War II, among 50 new towns that England has built in 3 generations, and they're looking now at a 4th generation of new towns. At best, they had about 50% of the people living and working in the same town.
Okay.
So, but having employment areas is part of it, retail areas for shopping, of course, schools, hospitals, fire, police, all the urban services that are needed to create a new town. The other thing that is somewhat unique about new towns is they tend to be planned and executed by a single entity, okay, either a private owner and private developer, as we find in the Woodlands with Mitchell Energy.
That's in Texas?
That's in Texas, outside of Houston, and Irvine, which is outside of Los Angeles, developed by the Irvine family. But in other countries, the new town development corporations, as in England, may be a public-private entity formed by the government. The biggest problem with creating new towns, and the reason why they actually failed in the United States in the brief period when we had a national law, and in 1970 there was the New Towns Act.
Oh, was there?
That funded 15 new towns, and of the 15, 14 went bankrupt.
Okay.
And the main reason they went bankrupt is the sites were essentially selected by the landowner and put forward, and often in locations that simply weren't ready for development.
Right. Were there any of them around here?
No.
They were all. Well, and that's, I would assume, part of the, we want to get to this, part of the reason is that it's so pre-developed around here that you really couldn't do a new town in the Boston area, right?
Right. There are large-scale, largely residential communities like Pine Hills next to Plymouth,
Okay.
which is smaller in scale but does have everything, including a little town center and shops and wonderful green space, and a great lifestyle.
Right.
One of the big issues in new towns has been why were they created? So in the case of England, they were created after World War II to deal with the need to rebuild neighborhoods that were destroyed in World War II and to promote decongestion of London.
Okay.
And that's the same for Paris, where the new towns were built to essentially help reduce the density.
Right.
But to bring it back to Winthrop, Winthrop is typical of what I would call suburban towns that have a town center that is in need of redevelopment.
Okay.
And so that is also a national issue, a worldwide issue as to how to make that happen.
Right. Well, Winthrop, I mean, it's funny you say that Winthrop's downtown is in need of redevelopment. There are people who would agree with that probably and some who would not. It depends what you're going for, I suppose. I mean, Winthrop has a nice enough downtown in a lot of ways, but it's not big, it's not huge, and I mean, just listening to your description, jobs is, I mean, I'm thinking, why do people want to leave Winthrop during the day? Jobs is probably the number one reason.
Right.
Right. And having Boston right next to you, that would sort of solve it as long as there's a way to get in and out of Boston pretty easily. Is that not
true?
The one way to
Well,
look at it?
and Winthrop is, well, it's part of a large class of communities that we would call inner ring suburbs.
Okay.
Now, in Winthrop's case, it's not just inner ring; it's it's very close to downtown Boston,
yeah, right.
which puts it in a class of very inner suburbs. But being a suburb, it has its own leadership and town council, and wants to express, as every community does, its independence and its own character.
Right, and the other thing that maybe people talk about a lot in terms of Winthrop lacking is a lot of industry or business, and that's part of the reason why the budget in the town can be tricky at times. Is that it's cited quite frequently that there's no real industry here. So and what do you do about that? I mean, people don't want the industry here, so that's
right.
Sort of a conflict too.
Well, when you say industry, that conjures up steel factories and smokestacks, whereas the main property tax generators are either retail or business parks or light industry, light warehouses.
Right. But
being so close to the airport, I mean, Winthrop's a natural place for airport-related industry.
Yeah, if there was land, which there's not, right?
Well, actually, there's quite a lot of land that is currently occupied by very low-density uses, and therefore, over the long run, which is 50 to 100 years, you would expect to be redeveloped.
Well, that's a good question. Would you? Because that, I mean, that's part of the fight here in town is that people don't want that because they like the character of the town. They like the fact that it doesn't have that industry. It doesn't have that going on.
Well,
But the cost comes with that.
No, it's a mistake in my view to view that a redevelopment has to change the character of the town. Good redevelopment enhances it and makes it even more desirable for the people who are already here.
So, okay. Well, I mean, to the degree you could diagnose that, then I was going to ask you more about new towns, but since we're on this, let's maybe take this a little bit farther. Then,
sure.
What are you able to sort of suggest something that you could see possibly coming here that's not here now, in sort of in a big picture way?
Well, I don't pretend to know a whole lot about the town, but just driving down the main street, the first thing you encounter is some very large parking lots with very low density and frankly not very attractive retail, which would be ripe for redevelopment. And the kinds of redevelopment that one sees in communities that I think have done it successfully are mixed-use development that will have a combination of housing and retail.
Right.
But again, it has to be done in a design and character and with full consultation to all the stakeholders so that it's sensitive to everybody's desires.
And so one of the things you sort of said in there, and it seems a big issue, which is you mentioned cars and transportation. And a lot of people talk about Winthrop being too congested, and often they don't make a distinction between whether they mean it's too congested in terms of people or cars, and
right.
That is a difference, right? I mean, you can have more people without necessarily a lot more cars, or even fewer cars, right?
All that's true. I have never encountered a development in the whole United States where the main opposition wasn't focused on traffic and congestion.
Right.
That is the standard argument against development. And to be honest, I don't have a whole lot of sympathy with that argument because I think the traffic will adjust, but also it doesn't mean, you know, people say, well, this project's going to add 500 cars a day to the road, and it's already, I have to wait for more than one light cycle here. If the traffic burden creates that kind of additional congestion, then it's incumbent on the developer to pay for the improvements that are needed to help reduce the congestion. And
can that fundamentally be achieved with a car solution, or does it? I mean, Winthrop used to have a trolley line through it. As a matter of fact, multiple trolley lines through it. Do we need to figure? Does there have to be some kind of fundamental change in our transportation structure in order to sort of move to the solution that you're kind of sketching out?
Well, yes. Everybody wants more people to take mass transit, and for sure that is a solution. And the whole basis for the MBTA Act.
Now we're talking about 3A.
Yes.
We call it, I know it's the MBTA Communities Act, and it's known commonly in town as the 3A, which
right.
the way works, yes.
The whole basis for that is that it makes sense to create density around transit nodes,
right.
Because with a transit node, people will use that to get around, and their car usage will be less.
Right.
And that, in fact, has been shown to be true in many communities, but it also depends on how close that development is to the transit node, and of course depends heavily on what kind of transit it is. Right. If it's near a subway line with trains running at least a frequency every 10 minutes or less,
right.
Then it works great.
Right.
If it's a remote bus line with where the buses stop running at 7 and only come every half hour,
Right.
then that probably isn't appropriate as a place.
Right. Well, so in Winthrop, we do have the Orient Heights T station, which it sounds like you went by
Yes.
on the way in. That does run, every 7 or 9 minutes, I believe. So it's within that realm that you're talking about, but it's not in Winthrop, and it's not, for some parts of town, it's certainly not walkable. Matter of fact, it's not walkable probably in most people's minds from anywhere in town.
Right. But one of the big changes we're beginning to see is that where you have a transit stop like that, at least people younger than I am will ride bikes or shared bikes to the transit stop, and that's a preferred mode of getting around in many European cities, of which probably the Netherlands is the preeminent example, where you'll pull up to a train station and see an acre with thousands of bicycles.
Right.
You wonder how anyone ever finds their own bicycle.
Right, and Winthrop doesn't have any of that, and so that sounds like maybe that's at least one thing that maybe is an obstacle to some of the fixes that you're talking about.
Well, this becomes, creating safe bike lanes is part of a larger solution.
So as far as 3A, again, go back on that, because I mean, you're right that the 3A Immediate Communities Act does require the housing within a certain distance of transit, but it defines transit as including bus stops, and so that basically covers all of Winthrop, but the bus pathways are more infrequent, to put it mildly. I mean, maybe every half hour for a lot of buses.
No, I think that's extremely relevant. If a bus only comes every half an hour, then yes, people can time their departure, but the reality is, if that's the frequency, people are going to prefer cars.
Right, and the 3A, and I'm sorry, the 3A law doesn't really do that. So I guess I don't know if you have an opinion on that, but is 3A? It's called the MBTA Communities Act, but is it really pushing it? Because for instance, one of the prime examples of 3A is Lexington, which is building, I think, 1,000 new units or something to that effect. But they're all in sort of car-oriented developments. They're not.
Yes.
It's not really creating any much new housing that's really transit friendly. Is that what you're seeing as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think getting people out of their cars into transit is a big uphill battle, and while I think that's certainly part of the motivation behind 3A, with or without the transportation, I think there's certainly a need for more housing, and two, it makes sense to put it in locations where mass transit is an option. However, to your point, if it's a bus line that comes every half an hour, I would say that's not an appropriate frequency to justify densification.
So here's a question that you would hear in Winthrop, which is does that mean the solution is to not have Winthrop be part of 3A, or does that mean the solution is to have a law like 3A do something about the transit problem and say that, well, you need to have more frequent transit?
Well, I would come down on the side that I think every community, including Winthrop, should do its part to have its fair share of addressing the housing needs. Yeah. And I don't think that burden should fall on one community more than another. Right. Having said that, I think just to apply the law, if there's a bus stop, then let's put a high-density project by it. I would agree with people in Winthrop that doesn't make sense. Now, if part of that is increasing the frequency of the bus so it really can function, then that becomes part of the conversation. But I would look more carefully at where the subway line station is, and the half-mile radius around that is certainly I guess, where I would look for densification.
Right, I hear you. So back to new towns. I'm sort of thinking of that and hearing your discussion about Winthrop, and sort of one of the key questions that comes to mind is, what's the value of thinking of new towns when it sounds like the problems that you're talking about exists both in new towns and old towns and everywhere in between. So what are we getting from sort of spending a lot of time thinking about new towns as opposed to thinking about the issues that you're getting at?
For me, new towns are a very important solution for addressing housing needs around the world, and especially with climate change causing areas to become uninhabitable. We have something called planned retreat, which is going to require the relocation of large populations and providing new housing.
Right.
Intellectually, I kind of look at new towns as these are newly developed communities, typically on greenfield sites outside the core metropolitan area. So
a greenfield site means just sort of forest.
Undeveloped land,
Okay,
and
yep.
certainly Winthrop.
Yeah.
Winthrop is not a new town.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, I think there are important lessons from new towns which are applicable everywhere. And the key lessons, the best new towns, are the ones that have a combination of modes of transit. Having just come from Asia, where all the successful new towns are built along freeways and major mass transit lines, including around Seoul. They're now building express transit with trains going, I was just on one, 180 kilometers an hour, that take a new town that is 30 miles from the heart of Seoul and used to take an hour to get into Seoul. Now that takes 15 minutes.
Okay.
So this is what's happening elsewhere in the world.
Right.
But among the key lessons is how do you create a vibrant, successful town center? How do you create recreation areas that people really want to go to and enjoy, and how do you improve the lives of the people who live there,
Right.
and importantly, serving all age groups and all income classes.
Right.
One of the failures of American new towns that are largely privately developed is that they tend to be upper income.
Right.
And they don't build a lot of social housing and don't serve that segment. So I think there are many lessons that new towns offer all communities, but I wouldn't want to say that taking Winthrop and trying to create a new town out of it is the way to go.
Right. Like you studied Irvine, California. You mentioned that at the beginning, and that's now a city, a big city. It's like 300,000.
Yes.
Just south of L.A. It started like in the 70s, so it went from almost zero to 300,000 since the 70s.
Yes.
But it is, I mean, as you mentioned, it is a higher income. It's not particularly diverse. Is that right as well? Other than it's white and Asian, essentially, right?
Pardon my laughing, because where Irvine is hit it out of the park is that they have a wonderful school system.
Okay.
To get the new town started in the late 1960s, the first thing they did was essentially win a competition to have a new branch of the University of California created, and they gave 1,000 acres in the middle of the town to create this campus. So you have higher education, but you have among the best school systems in the whole LA region.
Right.
And as the schools get better, then the people who really care about that move in. And yes, and also they have large industrial parks there, warehousing, that have become centers of Korean and other Asian companies. And so yes, it has a high Asian population, and that's probably helped the schools, because the schools get better and better, and more people want to move to Irvine because of the school quality.
Right, but outside of those two demographics, not a lot else. What does that tell us, if anything?
Well, Irvine does have a fair amount of affordable housing.
It does, okay.
But when we say affordable housing, you can't build affordable housing in the United States without some form of subsidy.
Okay.
And so the projects they have largely been created because of tax credits and other affordable housing subsidies.
Does that suggest something for here? I mean, we talked about 3A, but what else would you suggest from your research and you're looking at the rest of the world that the state of Massachusetts maybe should do, or the town of Winthrop should do in terms of whatever? Is it affordable housing or anything? What's your diagnosis there?
Okay, well, the real question to ask is how do we get more affordable housing? Okay. And the answer to that is complex and has many parts to it. Certainly having more subsidies available is important for getting more affordable housing, but there's a limited amount of that, and relatively little, well, there's virtually nothing that a single community can do, except if they have government-owned land. Okay. Getting a hold of the land at an affordable price is the single most important way to get affordable housing. Right. And if there is land like that available, or institutionally owned land that can be acquired at a below market price, which in effect represents a subsidy by the community to provide it, that's one way.
Do you see that going on in Massachusetts? I mean, we do have affordable housing programs in Massachusetts. Are they just not up to the job, or what do you sort of see big picture going on in that?
Well, to be honest, I haven't heard about a real push to take state-owned land and create housing on it. Right. That would certainly be one of the avenues, but that's not the only one. The amount of time and obstruction it takes to get a project off the ground can add $100,000 to the cost of a unit. Right. And so Massachusetts actually has probably the single most effective law in the whole country for creating what we call workforce housing, which is not deeply affordable, it's not subsidized, so people who make 30 to 60% of the median income can move in, but it is housing that people who make 80 to 120% of the median income can afford. Yeah. And this program, the 40B legislation, essentially overrides local zoning in towns that don't meet a 10% affordable housing threshold, and it overrides the new towns, it overrides the community's ability to stop the project. Yeah. This is highly controversial because people hate it, and even with it, it can take years and years to get a 40B project in some communities through. But compared to other states in the country, I believe it's generated over its lifetime over 40,000 units of workforce housing. Okay.
One thing, you mentioned that, but one thing we've learned from the 3A situation in town is that the state actually fundamentally has the right to set zoning everywhere in the town. I mean, there's a lot of fight over that here in town, but it's actually what the law says, right? That the state actually has the right to do that.
I don't think. My understanding is that they have the right to override the town and get projects built in areas that they think is appropriate. But as you know, not every community is buying into that and is able to, I guess, thwart that initiative for many years.
No, I get that, but it was sort of proven that the state has that right.
Yes, no, they do have that right.
And as far as 40B, the low income, I'm not sure. I don't know if you know either, but I believe in Winthrop that Winthrop meets that requirement. So there is no 40B going on here.
No, I think that's correct. Yeah. The 40B would not apply in a community that already meets the 10% affordable housing threshold.
And is 10%, I mean, it seems, is that a low number? Or do you think
relatively, one of the big issues, since I teach development, we have something called housing linkage, where if I want to build a market rate project, many communities will require the developer to allocate 20% of the housing to affordable. Yeah. And the fact is that the economics, except in the highest income areas, will not support a 20% allocation. And where that happens, not surprisingly, nothing gets built because the numbers don't work.
So that's what you mean by not, I was wondering what not support means. So what you mean is that if the requirement is to have 20% affordable, it just doesn't get built. Is that what you're, is that what you're
Right,
saying?
except in the highest, most exclusive areas, you can't get enough extra money from the market rate units to cover the subsidies required for the affordable housing.
Yeah.
Now, all that depends on what level of affordable housing are we talking about, because when I said workforce housing at 80 to 120% of the market rate, that requires less subsidy than if it's defined to be, say, 60% of the median income.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think we're running out of time, but I still have a lot of things I think I'll ask, and we certainly haven't solved the housing problem in Winthrop or in Massachusetts for that matter, but it was interesting to hear you kind of lay some of these things out. So,
Can I just...
Sure, go ahead.
I understand how controversial 3A is and how there's a real push to just say the state has no business telling us what to do. And part of me as a Texan says, absolutely, you know, man's home is his castle, and no one wants the state telling you what to do. Having said that, I really believe that there is plenty of opportunity in the city of Winthrop to add housing in appropriate places, and if it's done well, that it will enhance the community and bring both additional taxes and more people to the community who, over time, will make it a better place.
Yeah, okay. Well, Professor Richard Peiser, Harvard University, Professor of Real Estate Development, thank you very much for the time.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to offer my opinion.